And we're live. Welcome to the Nilvah Nexus, our weekly Thursday night Torah chat hangout. James the Idol Smasher at gmail.com is my address. Join us on Facebook and here on Google Plus at the Nilvah Nexus. Comment, rate, and subscribe. And one of these days, I want to have a banner back that'll tell you to do that all the time whenever you see me. Until then, I have to go out and buy a new stick of RAM, basically, to use Chrome with anything else. John actually, John's here, and he's made a really good banner, and I was hoping to use it, and my open, it had sound and everything, and you know that Google Chrome, and it kills everything else on my computer. I don't have a whole lot of RAM on here. I didn't need it 7-8 years ago when I built the thing. Now you need a lot more RAM, apparently. So. No topic for the day, but the Parsha, because there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. You get a little bit of the Levitical things, kind of the priestly actions when we're getting, you know, the urn and the oil and the incense, and we get a little bit of lessons on the census. The golden calf happens tonight or this week, and most folks are probably not going to be here, probably because they're might be coming out of a Purim party. I had thought that we would start Purim last night. But there are some folks who
it's going to continue into this night.
Okay. Well, we got a head start on it last night. There's another hangout they were doing where they would cheer for Mordecai and then boo for Haman. And I thought that was interesting. We didn't even cheer for Mordecai, but we cheered in our hearts. We were already cheering when we booed. So, I don't know. Big doing this week in the Parsha, isn't it, John?
That's just a minhag, a custom about, you know, whether or not you. There's no halacha that says you have to do whatever you want, whatever. It is what it is, or maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe we need a rabbi in here. So what's going on? It's jam packed this week. Actually, quite a lot's happened. I actually put out quite a few videos on my channel. I don't know. Have you checked? I put one out about the Erev Ra. Did you see that one about the Erev Ra?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting that the Midrash kind of made it pretty clear that the Jewish people sort of treated these Gerim, B'nai Noach, converts, whatever you want to refer to them as, the Erev Ra. Erev Ra just means basically the great. Rav means like rabbi, and that just means great. And then the word Arv would be kind of like on the outset. So the great outset, or the people coming in, people that are coming from the outside in. I guess that's what the Rav means, like those who are new to Judaism, those who are finding them way to the monotheism and Judaism and Torah and these beautiful people that were leaving Egypt with the Jewish people. And the Midrash sort of made it pretty clear that the Jewish people sort of treated these people like garbage. I mean that's kind of like how I felt the Midrash was explaining it. But then of course the Aaron Rav took it they went crazy at the end.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of compelling. I remember the video now. And that was something I didn't know. And I can kind of understand when, you know, you've been taking abuse for so long. Oh, now you want to be our friends. Oh, now you want to go with us. You know, I could see that. I could understand, you know, that because, you know, I could understand why there was some bad blood. And God does consistently remind us to treat the stranger well in our midst. He reminds us, you know, love the Ger because you were once Ger in Egypt. But yeah, I'd never heard that before. But I can sympathize.
Like, I'll read it here real quick. It says that, while Moses was in heaven, it says that Satan had came to the Jewish people and started taunting them. It says that, he was doing everything he could possibly do to believe that, it was over for them, that Moses had died and that they would be lost in the wilderness forever, and that was it. Oh, James, what happened to your camera? You upside down? What happened? You all right? Who's that?
That's Ross.
Oh, that's Ross. Oh, Ross, you're upside down. Your camera, it's upside down.
Hang on, I'll fix that.
It's like you. You're up. It's like it's your head. It's on backwards. No, I'm just messing with you. But we were just discussing here, Ross, that I did a YouTube video about this, and I thought it was very fascinating about how it discusses in this week's Midrash commentary for this week's Parsha that the Erev Ra was sort of, they didn't really have a favorable stance within Israel. With Israel, it says that Israel wouldn't allow these people, whatever you want to refer to them as, righteous Gentiles, Gerim, B'nai Noah. It says that they weren't allowed to travel within the camps. They had to travel from the outside, and they weren't even allowed to have manna. They actually had to eat the scraps and leftovers of the manna, which I found interesting. It even says here that Miriam's son actually taunted them, actually said had harsh words for them, and actually he was put to death. The Aaron Rav executed him. They put the...
What? Miriam, when she gets fired up, doesn't she? She got something to say, she'll say it.
Right, yeah. Definitely.
Later on in the Torah, but Parsha's later.
And it makes it pretty clear that Aaron was a pretty good guy. Aaron, we learned that he was a man of love. He really did everything he could possibly do for one another, for man again. He would really bring people together, and it makes it pretty clear that he did everything he can to pacify the crowd. This revolt that was taking place. And it basically makes it pretty clear that there was nothing that he could. You can't put any blame on Aaron in this particular situation, because he did everything he can to mitigate the situation, whatever it was, and eventually, what?
It was an impossible situation for the man. I mean, what do you do in his position?
These people were on fire. These people really, I guess from their perspective, it was just enough was enough. When are we going to have the same status as a real Jew, or you know what I'm saying? Equal footing, you know what I mean? And obviously, they took it way too far. And eventually they succumb to the revolt. I mean, they end in destruction. Their end was, although the Midrash doesn't make it clear on whether or not they did teshuva. I know Korach repented for a while and he came back, but we don't really know what happened to the Aaron Rav.
Path of Abraham says he never liked the romantic notion that only the Erev Rav were involved in the golden calf. He's not so sure that it was just them. That some of Israel might have succumbed to that, and some of the Erev Rav might have said, heck no. We just heard God speak. What are you doing? We know the Levites took no part in it. I wanted to read a section out of the Gutnick edition Chumash. I'll turn the camera on so everyone gets a look. So you can get this. You can buy these on Amazon. It's If you're low on fundage, well, yeah, we're reversed, and I can't fix that because Google Hangouts is
No, you're right side for me. You're perfect. I can read that.
really. Oh wow, well that's good. That's come. That reads right to left. All right, or left
Yeah,
to right.
Chumash.
Anyway, there's a section on the golden calf here about the sin of the golden calf. The beginning of chapter 32 in Exodus. We're on Exodus, by the way. If you're following along at home, the Parsha starts on 30, verse 11. But I'm on 32 here, and there's a great. I like the way the Gutnick edition kind of sums up. You know, it's a real user-friendly manual. Classic questions is what's under here. How could Aaron and the Jewish people make a golden calf soon after being given it after they witnessed God's miracles? Verses 1 through 6 is what we're discussing here in chapter 32. Saadia Gaon says Aaron wanted to test the Jewish people to see if they would actually worship idols. So he pretended to go along with their plan. Nevertheless, since he did not execute the idol worshippers immediately when they stumbled, God became angry with Aaron as well. Ibn Ezra and Kuzari say the Jewish people did not intend to worship idols, God forbid, rather. In Moshe's absence, now this is what I always found interesting about what Torah teaches. It's kind of coming from the other way around. Rather, in Moshe's absence, they were seeking a concrete form of divine service. The calf was thus intended to be an object through which they worshiped God. As Aaron said explicitly, tomorrow should be a festival to God. I find that interesting. We'll come back to that. The Ramban, Nachmanides, says, the Jewish people did not intend to worship idols, God forbid. Rather, since Moshe had disapproved, they sought a replacement for him to guide them. Disapproved, I can't read. Let me read that again. Let's start from the beginning on that, all right? This is the Ramban. The Jewish people did not intend to worship idols, God forbid. Rather, since Moshe had disappeared, they sought a replacement for him to guide them in serving God. Aaron chose a calf since the celestial chariot, the face of an ox, can be seen to the left side, representing God's strength. And we can find that in Ezekiel chapter 1. Da'as Zakinam says the Jewish people were split into three groups. A, those who chose merely looking for a new leader. B, those who wished to worship idols. And C, the tribe of Levi, who remained totally loyal to God. And Tiferes Yohannesson said that the Jewish people knew that if Moses had not disappeared, the tabernacle would have been built and God would have spoken to Moshe from between the two cherubs. When they saw that Moshe disappeared, they decided to make the cherubs themselves so that God would speak to them. Thus, they told Aaron, "Make us gods that will go before us." In verse 1, the plural, since they intended to make two cherubs. However, instead of making cherubs with the face of a child as intended for the tabernacle, they chose instead the face of an ox, a calf. This is because the face of an ox appeared on the left-hand side of the celestial chariot of Ezekiel, whereas Moshe is associated with God's right hand. As the verse says, he led Moshe's right. He led at Moshe's right the army of his glory. Isaiah 63, verse 12. So when Moshe disappeared, or when Moshe departed, they presumed that God was no longer channeling his blessings through the right hand or the right side of the chariot, rather through the left, through Aaron. Therefore, they made cherubs with the face of an ox calf. That is immensely interesting as well. But my question is, and if we had a rabbi here, maybe you guys know or could help, is how can we be quoting from a vision given to Ezekiel as a means for the reasons things happen what they did in the Torah, in Exodus? How are we looking forward to Ezekiel's chariot to explain what happens in Torah?
I'm not sure I understand.
Big, deep question.
That's a good question. That's a big question.
I'm not sure I understand it.
Say that again, Ross. I'm sorry.
I said, I'm not sure I understand your question.
How can, okay,
The answer is he's saying the answer can be found in Isaiah. I'm sorry, Ezekiel, because of his vision of what he saw, and that was what happened actually 2,000 years before that. Is how can we supplement something that happened in the future for something that happened in the past?
especially when it comes to the good chunk of them illiterate people, you know, how you know what I mean? How can we use that? I'm sure there are rabbinics I'm not aware of that would explain it, but I don't
that. Well, the answer is pretty. It's the answer I would give is that the Chabad Homish, the commentary that you read from, is giving you a very deep, mystical Kabbalah answer. It's very profound. It's welcome to the room, Rose.
Hello, Mostly.
How are you?
Hello.
What?
Good.
It's just. I guess the answer is if that's how God operates, is that his heavenly chariot is that of an ox, right? I think it's like a four-headed thing, it's an ox, an eagle, a bear. What are those four? There's four animals.
An ox, an eagle. Was it a lion?
This is a lion. Yeah, lion. And what's the other one? A bear, right? Or something like that.
I think it was a man's head.
It was a man's head. Okay.
Ah, okay, yeah.
So well then my question.
So what they're trying to say is those animals represent a sort of quality of what God represents. So if God is strength, Gevurah, or God is Chesed, kindness, then he's channeled in a sort of way that refers to those qualities of those what those animals represent. So they made so when they were idol worshiping with an ox, what they're trying to say is it wasn't really an ox per se. It was more of a manifestation of a god of how they perceived him to be. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I was also wondering, you had the 70 elders feast and gaze upon God's presence. My goodness, these people heard God speak to them. Perhaps.
I actually thought that was pretty clever of Aaron. That Aaron, you know what? I'm going to try to slow down this riot. Let's have a party, and let's try to get people to forget, and let you know what I mean. I think that was actually pretty clever.
Right.
It just makes you wonder, did the people of Israel at Sinai have a similar vision that Ezekiel had? That would explain.
Right, yeah. That would make sense, yeah.
That would explain how Now see, I also heard that the calf in Egyptology was the carrier of the message of the gods, like Mercury, the messenger of the gods. And I wish I knew. Where was this? And Aaron chose that as a familiar, as something familiar to them, that they would recognize the calf. Oh, you want a Moses in Egypt? They said cows are the ones that transmitted God's message to people. So he chose, you know, I wish I knew if this is an official, if this was good stuff or not, but he chose the calf because it was familiar to people who'd been in Egypt for, you know, centuries on end. But it's interesting that even in that, you know,
it says that I think it does say that they've reached a level of prophecy that that sort of group of people. And I would have to ask, you know, did the Arab Ra actually receive this sort of level of prophecy as well? It doesn't really state that, but I would you know, think that they would be part of it. I don't know, but it does say that you know, what does it, I think it says that didn't it say that the when they crossed the Jordan, I'm sorry, they crossed the Red Sea, that didn't they were able to have visions of like the future, and like that there was like 12 different paths, the 12 different tribes,
right?
And like they were able to know things that they wouldn't normally not know. I thought there was commentary of that we read one time.
All right.
I
think what you're trying to say, what it sounds like you're trying to say, is that if they were able to see what we're talking future here, it sounds to me like one way to express it would be, for one moment, they became Adam, and they could see from one end of time to the other. So, because there really is no yesterday, today, and tomorrow, there is only now. You understand what I'm saying? Time
sure,
is
you know, yeah, I understand.
time is an illusion. So what in one way of saying it is that, and Solomon says it in a different way, there is nothing new under the sun. In other words, what you are seeing now has already happened. And what you're doing now will happen again. There is only now. It's like a wave, okay? We see it as peaks and valleys. Peaks and valleys. It's just one continual motion. I'll be right back.
In when I first discovered Kabbalah, way back in the day, the crossing of the Sea of Reeds was one of the figurative ways that they looked at it was this was the point of no return. When you make a commitment, there's still a grace period, you know, where you can pull out. But once you cross the sea, you've made a commitment. There is no going back. Once you cross, you can't go back. And everything from your past won't catch up with you. So there's a transition that a person goes through from the shore from one end of the shore to the other. And that seems to fit right in. I'd heard the 12 paths laid out for each of the tribes. I had not heard that they had visions, that there was an Adamic moment. But if you look at it, but when I look at my Kabbalistic teaching way back in the day, that makes perfect sense. When that stroke of genius, when you do make that change and there is no going back. And you know, when atheists always say, give me the evidence, and you know, you'll be surprised how devout I'll be. Well, these are people that were given it, and I can understand when you let go of so much of that junk in your life. I can see it. It makes complete and total sense. I had not heard the midrash, but from what I've been taught elsewhere, makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. That's my 2 cents anyway.
Okay. Can I come at this from another angle?
Absolutely.
Hashem, when he was speaking to Abraham, told Abraham, your descendants will go into Egypt. Your descendants will remain there in captivity for a while. I will bring your descendants out. Okay? Now, if Abraham knows this, and he tells Isaac, and Isaac tells Jacob, and Jacob tells his 12 sons, they all know that this is coming. Nothing has been a surprise. From going into Egypt, falling into captivity, if you will, and coming out of Egypt, they knew that there was going to be a Moses someday. They just didn't know when. Okay? Because I think it was Isaac or somewhere, Abraham, Isaac, there's a little key verse in there where Hashem tells them, when I bring them out, I will, it has something to do with his name. If you understand, we are in the book of Shemot, which is names. And this whole section is about the names of God, all through here.
Ooh.
Right?
I did not know this. Oh, this is where we find the 72 names, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh.
This is God revealing himself. Okay? He revealed himself to Abraham. He revealed himself to Isaac. He did so to Jacob. And he has worked his plan through every single one of the tribes. Joseph is especially one because we focus there. Okay, him rising to power, him revealing the dreams, him keeping Torah. Judah, on the other hand, it is intertwined here and there. But you're seeing Judah and Joseph. You continue to see the thread of Judah and Joseph. From here all the way up to the spies that are coming up, the only two that came back with a good report.
Huh.
Judah, what? Okay. Joshua, son of Nun, is from Joseph's tribe, Ephraim. Hur is from Judah, the tribe of Judah. He's the one that gets killed. Bezalel is the one that was endowed with all of the craftsmanship. He's from the tribe of Judah. Are you seeing this?
I am now. I didn't know that about the two spies. Because we know this goes all the way to the Messianic age.
Yes.
Judah.
Yes.
Is this the Sfei Denim we always hear Rabbi Katz talking about?
Part of it, yes.
Okay.
The stick of Joseph and the stick of Judah in the book of Ezekiel coming together as one. Right?
Two trees feeding one menorah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's all interlaced all throughout here. And then when they do go into the land, okay, Joseph's bones are buried in that section of land, Shechem, which is where he went to go look for his brothers before they threw him in the pit.
Oh.
Judah was the one that was responsible for him not being killed. What wound up happening was that Joseph was sold into slavery. Who redeemed him? Judah. I personally will take care of this matter. I will go down, and if this doesn't happen, right? What two tribes went ahead of Jacob into Egypt, set up the tents of Shem?
The Levites were one.
Joseph and Judah.
Oh.
The theme just runs all through. And from the beginning, Abraham, he told Abraham, people will go in. They will be subjected for so many years. I'm going to bring them out. And when I bring them out, Abraham, I'm going to bring them right back to the place where you are. He told Abraham, we're going to kick out the Hittites, Hivites, Jebusites, and all the other ites. And then after Moses shows up and it starts leading them out, what do they say again? I'm taking you to a land of milk and honey, and we're going to kick out the Hivites, the Hittites, the Jebusites. Nothing's changed. And when Joshua, who is also from the tribe of Joseph, leads the people over the Jordan into the land, what is repeated again? We're going to kick out the Hivites, the Jebusites, and so on.
Oh, wow.
Step back and take an overview at some point.
I got to ask you something, Ross. That's something John and I were talking about before we got in here, or before you got in here. It was. Can you sympathize? Can you empathize at all with why Israel? I mean, are we not seeing some of this today? I am shocked at that midrash. I don't think I paid enough attention to it when I watched it the first time. I don't always have time. If not kids, I'm at work. I don't get to watch a lot of what I would like to. I don't think I caught just the implications that your video was making, John, about how the Erev Ra were kind of treated badly. I wonder if that's because of the golden calf. And I don't remember the video right off. My head's, where my head's been, but was it because of the golden calf that they shunned, somewhat rejected the Erev Ra, much like God did? God says, I didn't want these people, and Moses like, yes, you do, trust me. Please, what'd you bring these people for? Good grief. I just wondering if this was it, or if the golden calf was a result of that isolation. After Sinai, you'd think everybody became. Here's the thing: when God spoke, I thought everybody became instantly Jewish. Boom, no, end of story. Once you heard God speak, once that connection was made, everybody was a convert at that point. And yet we see that there's rejection. I just wondered if their treatment was the reason for their attachment to the material.
Let's try this on a timeline, okay?
All right.
Come out of Egypt, you go through the Red Sea, you begin to wander in the wilderness, and there's several encampments along the way. Most of the people are grumbling, brought us out here in the wilderness to kill us. We don't have any water to drink. Our cattle don't have any water to drink either, right? So they're, huffing, puffing, kicking, grunting, groaning. Some of them say, I want to go back to Egypt. Some of them like, let's hang on and let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
You get up to Sinai. And then like you see in Mishpatim, all of this was iterated. You're still at the 7 laws. Everything was iterated in Mishpatim. Moses writes it all down. He makes an offering. He sprinkles blood on the altar. He sprinkles it on the people. They ratify the covenant of the ancients. Okay?
On an altar of the ancients, mind you.
On an altar of the ancients. Then he says, look, I am leaving Aaron and Hur here with you. They're going to be your judges. I'm going up to get instructions from Hashem. He goes up, and this is your first 40 days. This is it. At the point of time, we know that the golden calf gets built, Hur gets killed, most of the 7 laws are broken, the laws that they just said that they would hear and obey or do. And while he's still up there, and this is apparently in your first 40-day reign, he says, you need to get back down there. Your people have already gone astray. Moses comes up with the equivalent of, no way. Now, mind you, Moses is an altered state, 40 days and 40 nights without water or food. This guy is definitely not in the physical world. He's in some other place. Okay? He goes down and he breaks the set of tablets, the first set at the golden calf. Now, do we know for sure that at what point was it that the mountain shook and rumbled and it went up in the air and it got held over everybody's head and everybody's seeing letters? If this was before his first trip up, either these folks had got no fear of God, incredibly short memories, or I don't know what to think. I mean, how are you going to forget a mountain dangling over your head, rumblings and smoke, and seeing words in the air?
Because the fundamental principle of Judaism, you don't rely on miracles. No, that's the fundamental principle. It's
anybody can do a magic trick.
Exactly. I mean, there are people that convert to Roman Catholicism because they see the Virgin Mary on a piece of toast. Is that the standard by which you believe in God?
I'll tell you what. If I'm standing around and I'm seeing words float through the air and a mountain dangling over my head, that must be some of the best hallucinogenic drug I've ever had in my life, worth more.
Okay, yes, so. And why would you hinge your belief on that, though?
I'm not hinging my belief on that. What I'm saying is, are you going to say this is a miracle or a hallucination?
Or maybe it was open. Well, since all the flash, all the the rumbling voice, the ram's horn sound, it was done.
That's what I'm saying. You've got this incredible ram's horn sound so loud that you can't hear it. There's a mountain dangling over your head, smoke going everywhere. Words are floating through the air visibly. You're not the only one seeing it. Everybody there is seeing this. Now, at what point do you begin to tell yourself, oh, these are nothing but miracles, nothing here to see? We went through a split Red Sea and all this is going on. At what point do you say something supernatural is happening here?
Maybe it stopped. They cried out, and Moses said, "I'll go up there myself." Then he goes up there, and it's all quiet.
But I think we just sidestepped. I think we went off in a tangent there with Russ. What Russ is saying, it didn't answer the fundamental question that James started off with about the Aaron Rav.
Well, that's my point. If everybody saw this, everybody in the camp saw it, Erev Rav, the non-Erev Rav, the Levites, if everybody saw this, well, the Levites are willing to stick true. The Erev Rav want to go build a golden calf. And then there's some other people like,
We'll just watch.
Yeah,
but the problem is this, though. There was an entire group of people that experienced the same thing that the Jewish people experienced.
Right.
But they were not considered part of them. There was institutionalized bigotry. There was some sort of institutionalized hatred for outside. Even though, yes, the Arab Rav were absolutely 100% Jewish. They were absolutely Jewish. They were converts. A convert is a native born is the same as someone who comes to Judaism, whether anyone likes it or not. I know people don't like to hear that, and they make this whole big thing about how much you can never convert to Judaism. There's no such thing as a convert, and that you have to stay separate, and that Gerim are separate. And it's nonsense. I'm sorry to break it to you. And it stems from this situation, this moment in time. It goes back to even then that even the Jews themselves said, no, I'm going to look down on these converts. And it even says in the Midrash that they fed them the scraps of their foods. That's how much they looked down on them. It says they didn't even let them eat full loaves of manna. They fed them the scraps.
Okay,
so that's James's question. That's the premise of James' question.
Yeah, was it the actions of the golden calf, or was it? That's what I was asking.
No. The Aaron Rav felt like they were being abused. That they were absolutely just as much as they were just as much Jewish as a native-born blood from the tribe of Levi or whatever tribe they particularly came from. And so out of their revolt, out of their frenzy, they made the golden calf. They became, I hate to say it, they sort of became anti-Semites in a way. They kind of, their abuse at one point, yes, we could all agree that it was wrong. I think we all agree that it was how the Jews, if we're going by the Midrash, was wrong. But then their actions sort of, okay, maybe you had a statement to say at first, but now you're going off the deep end. Now you're doing golden calves and you're leading people astray and you're doing this, you know what I'm saying?
All right, here's my point. You're saying Jews. I think what you mean to say is if you're not from any one of these particular tribes, you've just come along with us.
That's what I got.
Because all the way up until Moses actually came down with that second set, nothing happened except for the covenant of the ancients. So there were people there, yes, not from any one of the 12 tribes. That's obvious. And now, yet that's why some of the Arab Rav, as you say, were Jews. Well, that could mean Arab Rav would be someone from the tribe of Simeon or Asher or whatever, or Dan.
I thought the mixed multitude were Egyptians and those living with or enslaved by the Egyptians from other areas. It was the hub. It was the metropolis of the world.
There were Egyptians in the mix. That's no doubt. And they were probably the ones that were screaming the loudest about wanting to go back. I want to go home. Back to my idolatry, back to my fish, back to whatever. You guys came out of Egypt.
That's happening later, though. The whole complaining about wanting to go back to Egypt, that happens after that happens after the 10 Commandments are given.
What do we have here? About a month, 2 months between.
We're talking about the time they leave Egypt to the time they get 10 Commandments. It's only less. That's less than a month.
Less than a month, then.
Less than a month.
So we can understand why Israel, and I hate to say it, and this is not in any way because I know how we're supposed to be diversity, welcoming, all yada yada. I get that, but I can understand why at this point Israel's about self-preservation. We're getting the F out of Dodge, this junk hole that has become Egypt. Up until the Sinai moment, I can sympathize 100%. And I know I sound like a schmuck. I can sympathize with Israel completely why they would want to like nobody else around. I can really get that. After seeing God, it makes you wonder, you know, are you telling me that there's nobody in the era of Rav who would not be jaw drop in awe and would be a sniveling, you know, groveling servant at that point? And does that mean that there were no Israelites ever after 400 years of institutionalized slavery, or somewhere in that 400 years, that they didn't, you know, that they didn't succumb to, you know, that they didn't bring enough Egypt out of them to lead them a little more toward the party? They're having dances over there. There's all these shiksas, you know. Are you telling me that no Israelite was tempted compared to the era of Rav? At Sinai, it's like it levels the playing field. It's boom. Until then, I don't want to say I support bigotry, but I am in full understanding of why Israel might have been isolationist, xenophobic at that time of anybody else, particularly Egyptians.
You're about halfway zoomed out.
Wait. All right, zoom me.
Okay. Zoom a little further up. You already know because it was told to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and he passed it down to his sons that they were going to be in Egypt and that they would come out of Egypt one day and someone would come and lead them out of Egypt. You already know this. There's not a surprise here. And when it does happen, sure, they're just a tad skeptical, but hey, all right, it's happening. They get through the Red Sea. Now we know for sure. Okay? Now, if you have been told this and you know this and you're expecting it and it's finally happening, at what point do you say, hey, you know, this isn't what I thought it was. Let me go back to Egypt. No, it's like after 400 years, I'm finally getting to see with my own eyes the promise come true. We're out of there. And if the conditions were all that they said, I don't think any one of the tribes would be in a hurry to go back in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Unless they were just so complacent with, okay, yeah, he whipped me every day, and he beat me every day, and he called me names every day, but at least I got three square meals in a cot. Really? No, I mean, they knew this was coming. Because Moses even said, what should I say to them to let them know that it's really time? This is what you'll say to them.
Right, but this is what you're applying is to the Jews themselves, the Hebrews, whatever you want to refer to them as.
Hebrews.
Right. Okay. Israel, but there are. Oh, we have a certified rabbi in the room. Here we go. Now we can ask. Now we can actually get answers.
We've got a list here, so be prepared. We're in the Parsha. We're in the discussion of a bigger question, but right now we're at the when it comes to the treatment of the heir of Rav by Israel. Pre-Sinai juxtaposes post-Sinai. Is the golden calf a result or the reason for the disparity? The disparity that we have, was there a natural disparity coming out? What happened to Sinai juxtaposed the golden calf? Why people would split off? Were they Israelites? Were they? So that's where we're at. Ross, you were in the middle of saying something. Go, catching you up, my friend. Go. I'll just shut up now and let Ross. I hope you remember. I hope you know where you're at, man. I didn't mean to. Go ahead.
It was all I was saying is zoom out and try to look at the overall. I mean, I understand that you're trying to focus on this one point, and as far as a definitive,
but the point is that these okay, let's just say these Gentiles wouldn't have known about what you're talking about, Ross. If you told a goy, then God told Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their descendants are going to be slaves and they're going to be taken out. What are you talking about? They would scratch their head. What are you talking about? What do you mean?
Exactly. And that's why I said some of the ones that were there, that were Egyptians, that had come along, for the ride. For whatever reason, they came out. And I'm not going to tell you that they were not part of the Erev Rav. Because at this point, all you have are 7. Everybody is under the 7 until you get to Sinai. Now, as far as the after effect, the mumbling and the moaning and the groaning, okay, well, that's human nature. And yes, it didn't go away, but at least you didn't have the golden calf again. What was the reason for it? Like you said, James, it could have been all of the above. I wouldn't cite just one reason. I'll shut up. Asher, would you like to chime in on this? Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, amigo.
Absolutely, Baruch Hashem.
All right, so I just got on now, so I sort of missed everything you guys have been talking about. But I did hear the notion of the Erev Rav and 7 laws and all this stuff. First of all, the notion that the Erev Rav were evil is a much, much later idea.
Yeah, we're getting at that. There's a disparity.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Right, okay. So Erev Rav just means mixed multitude. Right, and the understanding is that it's not just Egyptians, but it was other slaves that were present at the time. Right, and nowhere that I'm familiar with in rabbinic literature does it ever say that before Sinai, all these individuals were keeping 7 laws, including the children of Israel. That is something that people put together nowadays, right? Because they bought into the notion that 6 laws were given to Adam and the 7th law to Noah, but that wasn't universally held, right? I'm sure there was some standard of morality, but it really wasn't limited to 7 laws, and it doesn't appear like that in the Talmud at all, right? In terms of the Erev Rav, I think they're used like a scapegoat to make Israel look good, but the understanding is that they were wiped out, right, after the sin of the golden calf, but then we continue to see Israel sin afterwards. So they used them as a scapegoat as long as they could, but even when they weren't around, they had no one else to blame but themselves, right? And it's kind of frustrating every time I hear them blaming Israel, even nowadays. Nowadays, whenever there's someone amongst Israel doing something that Israel does not approve of, or the rabbis don't approve of, they'll call him an Erev Rav. I remember when I was living in Israel, Ehud Olmert was called an Erev Rav, right? Because now it's not just a physical people, it's a spiritual people, like similar to a Moloch, right? And now we have this notion of the spirit of a Moloch. So apart from us having a commandment to eradicate a Moloch, now we have to eradicate the spiritual descendants of a Moloch. Now, this is them running it. They're like, when a society doesn't have a real evil to fight, they manufacture one.
Wow, that's nasty.
And this is why we really have to make a distinction between Midrash and Agadah. Midrash and Agadah is the same thing, but Midrash, Agadah / and actual halakha and what's binding. But I think that any time that people belittle the notion of the Erev Rav, they're bashing the idea of the convert. You know what I mean? They're saying that these people were in some way disposed to do bad because they were Gentiles, while the Jews were in some way inherently was superior to them, right? It waters down the whole notion of Torah, that the only reason someone would choose to follow Torah or behave in a certain way is because of the blood running through their veins. Really, I was always of the opinion that Caleb was part of the Erev Rav. We see him later representing Yehuda, but the understanding is that he was absorbed into the tribes, and that's what happened to the mixed multitude. They were absorbed into Israel, right? Because it doesn't say what happened to them.
Yeah.
So
there's no specific people given to who Moses orders the Levites to. He says execute them. They go out and they go out throughout Israel, but there's no distinction made as to who took the sword.
Right. Well, there is a word in Hebrew. The Erev Rav. It's really a descriptive term, but that actual word is used because it says those people that you brought out, right? And it uses the word Erev Rav, but that doesn't mean that it's the specific non-Hebrews. Mind you, back then, being a Hebrew really meant nothing because you had no Torah. Now, if you're Kabbalistically inclined and you even believe Adam had the whole Torah, then what I'm saying doesn't make any sense to you. But according to the Torah wasn't given till it was given, right? Exodus chapter 20, right? So the Hebrews weren't even conscious of the fact that they had to circumcise themselves, with the exception of the tribe of Levi, right? They behaved just like their neighbors would have behaved. So there's no point in pointing the finger and say that every time there's problems in the wilderness, it's the Erev Rav. And then it goes back to why converts are mistreated nowadays, because they're thinking, are you part of the Erev Rav? Are you some sort of insincere convert? I remember
yes,
when I was in Israel, there's always scandals in the Orthodox world with child molestation and stuff like this. I mean, this happens in all societies that are very closed and separated between men and women, right? And then the understanding in like religious areas in Yerushalayim, like Meir Shara and Malodafna, is that all these individuals who are doing the child molestation are converts to Judaism, former priests who converted to Judaism. It's complete nonsense, but they believe this, right? But they believe, now, it's because there's an actual statement, and it's tied to actual halakha in the Talmud, that you're not supposed to leave your animals alone with Gentiles, lest your Gentiles sodomize the animals. Right? Now,
sorry.
But this doesn't mean that Gentiles, by their nature, are prone to do this. Is that back then, idolaters, the idolatry that existed during and before the Talmud is completely different to any form of idolatry that will exist today, right? So back then, having sex with animals was part of pagan worship. Yeah. Right, having sex with males and females in temples. They have, with the notion of a kedeshah, like a temple prostitute, right? So it's not that Gentiles were prone naturally to do this, but it was part of their culture to do stuff like that, right? So that translated to the modern Jewish mind of today. I remember when I was converting, one of the rabbis who was converting me in Miami Beach, he asked me how many of my relatives were married to sisters and mothers and stuff like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's because when someone grows up in a bubble, they think that everyone outside that bubble is like a caveman. They don't understand that anyone who comes from Christianity or Islam is so ethically superior to the people or religions of Talmudic or pre-Talmudic times, but a religious Jew wouldn't know that because most Jews don't speak to people who disagree with them much. And honestly, I think
habit. Wouldn't you think it's at this point it's just a bad habit, a collective bad habit?
Absolutely. And it's weird that I'm talking about this now, but Purim is a perfect example. I brought a lot of people to Torah, and I feel that I've made many of them less ethical in certain areas than they used to be. In other words, I remember in Israel, walking down the old city, during Shushan Purim, and seeing little kids passed out drunk on the street on Purim.
Ooh.
And it's I don't think these people know what drunkenness actually does to a family. On this night, there's women who get beat for the first time, molestations that happen for the first time. It's all this nonsense. And I have a whole video bringing down the halachas, that there isn't a halacha to get drunk, and as a matter of fact, what the law to drink is only during the Suda. And the Suda, the meal, is during lunchtime during the day of Purim. But nowadays, they get drunk on the night of Purim. You know, so they completely twist it. They completely go into the halakha. And the halakha is to drink only wine. You know, but now, I mean, they're drinking vodka and whatever, you know, that will get them wasted.
If I may.
It's a complete desecration of God's name. You know, so for a Jew to point their finger at a Gentile and say that we're ethically primitive, or, you know, I converted, but I still identify, at least ethically, with a lot of Christians. I mean, I personally think that Christians currently outdo Jews ethically. However, theologically, the Jew outdoes the Christian, which is why I think that when a Christian comes to Judaism, it is really a match made in heaven, because we have the superior theology of the Jew and the superior ethics of the Christian. And it's really, it really makes for an ideal individual. But of course, you say this to a Jew, he's not going to be able to compute because he doesn't know Gentiles. He doesn't know, at least in the Orthodox world, he doesn't, you know, like he thinks every Gentile's out to kill every Jew. And this is something that Kabbalah introduced, with the idea that the Gentile is intrinsically bent on hurting the Jew. All right. I mean, there's a statement, it's a rabbinic statement reiterated by Rashi. It says, Esav l'sonei Yaakov, halacha kavua, that Esav intrinsically hates Jacob, and this is just like the way things are, you know. But this is not in the Torah. I mean, the Torah doesn't tell us that Gentiles inherently or intrinsically hate Jews. It says that Jews suffer for not keeping Torah. Not because Gentiles, you know, now, mind you, Gentiles, at least back then, let's say Amalek, right? I mean, Amalek would have attacked any nation for power, for gain, right? Mm-hmm. But to say that Gentiles intrinsically hate Jews, and this is a common thing nowadays. They're like, oh, of course, now they're going to blame the Jews. I'm like perhaps you should think, like, stop and ask the question, is there a reason why we're blaming the Jews? I mean, because 9 out of 10 times there is, you know, but it's anti-Semitic to mention that, right? I mean, I think, but if I didn't convert to Judaism, I probably would have been like the biggest anti-Semite. I mean, just because I'm a student of World War II history. I mean, they're not going to put one like past me, you know, like on why Jews were hated during the Holocaust. It wasn't because we kept mitzvot and we put boxes on our heads. No, it's clearly because Jews were communists.
There was a good artist who was able to break down every one of the 613 laws that was not being fulfilled as to what happened to them. He was able to take every one of those laws and apply it to 613 things that, for instance, the numbers on the arms, because women were wearing, you know, strappy shoulders, spaghetti straps and things like that. And so the exposed arm.
Oh, that's nonsense. I think,
okay.
I mean, God's going to murder, but God's going to allow Nazis to murder Jews, you know, because women are wearing, you know, like short sleeves. As a matter of fact, there is no actual halakha to wear long sleeve shirts for women. I mean, it's a custom. It's just like there isn't a law to, like, for women to wear pants. I mean, there's a Kabbalist that goes even further, you know, but he existed before the Holocaust, and he said that the reason for the pogroms in Europe, these big pogroms, was because people were speaking in the synagogue during prayer. You know, I mean, that's enough to drive someone to leave religion. I mean, if God is really that silly to massacre children, or, you know, like, just because women are wearing like short sleeve shirts, trust me, we have bigger issues, right? I mean, there's many rabbis, but the Chafetz Chaim, like, also like his great student Rav Elchanan Wasserman, they wrote very clear that the reason the Jews were hated during that time is specifically because Jews were communists, and Jews were responsible for killing more people, specifically Gentiles, than Hitler killed in the concentration camps and the gulags. But no one wants to talk about this. But it's documented. There's many rabbis who spoke about this. Rabbi Burl Wein spoke about this, and recently Rabbi Mizrahi mentioned something about it.
Wasn't the Bolshevik Revolution have Jewish backing?
Not just the Bolshevik Revolution. the Mensheviks were also Jewish. I mean, they were socialists, right? Even Israel was founded to be a communist country. Most people don't know this, right? The Bund, all these Jewish organizations, there was always a picture of Karl Marx behind it. Which is why the early settlements of Israel were all kibbutzim. So kibbutzim were socialist enclaves, right? But when they realized that all these kibbutzim were going bankrupt, they changed their whole system, which is why they lost the support of Stalin. And then that's when the U.S., France, and all these like free countries started supporting Israel. But most people don't know. In Israel, it was almost impossible to be Shomer Shabbat because the people who ran the country were communists, and they wouldn't give you a card, like a labor card, to work if you kept Shabbat. There's a lot of controversy, like in Israel, like the religious people, like right when they would get off the plane, they would make them shave their beards and cut their peyot off. And the Yemenite religious families would have their kids stolen from them right from the hospital and transferred to these secular like kibbutzim for re-indoctrination. Most people don't know about any of this stuff because you're not allowed to say it or you'll be called an anti-Semite. Now, I could say it because I'm technically Jewish now, but it's like a shock. It's like a shock. So there's how do we even get, okay, right. I was talking about how like sometimes being Jewish makes you less ethical than where you came from. So you have to remember where you came from. I mean, I have videos saying that I defend Christians in defense of Christianity and stuff like that. It's we always have to make a distinction between the ethical and the ceremonial. Okay, right. Christians now. I teach that some parts of Messianic Judaism is not idolatrous, but Christianity in general is idolatry, right? However, idolatry is not unethical. Idolatry is unholy and ceremonially against the Torah. However, murdering is unethical. Stealing, lying is unethical. Mistreating the widow, orphan, the stranger, that's unethical. So nowadays, there's no distinction between the two. I had a post on my Facebook page a few months ago.
Well, it's only the prohibition of idolatry. It's not that you have to believe in God. There's no way to enforce that with the person, but you can certainly prohibit the action of bowing to idols, serving an engraven image, per se.
Right. Well, like the understanding back then was that to be an idolater by definition meant that you were unethical because you were lawless, you had no morality, you had no ethics. But nowadays, that's not the case. But I was talking to this pretty known famous rabbi, and then he was telling me about Yitzhak Shapira, right? And he said, this guy is evil, he should burn in hell. And I'm saying, whoa. You're only different in him like in the whole Yoshki issue, that doesn't make him unethical. I mean, that makes him unholy, but so I define a religious fanatic as someone who begins to judge unbelievers by ceremonial standards instead of ethical ones. Because there is ultimately a distinction. So a Christian nowadays may be unholy because he's an idolater, but he's very ethically advanced. In other words, you could be an idolater, you could be a polytheist, and still be ethical, right? I mean, so nowadays, because people fail to make that distinction, every Christian, they think, oh, well, he believes in Jesus, so he's evil, or it's almost like a primitive approach, kind of bundled in with xenophobia, But I think,
as far as the religion, it's when you label them by the religion, and Christians will wear the cross, and I can get that, but when you look past that, particularly North American Christians, we are the most charitable nation on the planet, and we blow everybody else away in that. We give more to ourselves and to others than any other country on the planet, and this is primarily, let's face it, a Christian country, right?
Absolutely.
We could say that. Primarily, it was founded by pretty much Christians. All the people that settled the 13 colonies were Christians, but that's what they were born into. But here they could be free to be the good people. And I mean, how can you can't, when it comes to charity, tzedakah, for the level that it is in this world, the soup kitchens, who houses the homeless and feeds? These are soup kitchens. Most are churches. These are Christians doing this out of, you can't knock it, man. God's shining through. I always wondered, why did God choose this face? Why did God choose, of all people in my lifetime? I wake up here and I'm born in 1974, and I wake up to, everybody knows, there's Elvis, Mickey Mouse, and Jesus, the most recognizable faces on the planet. Why Jesus? Why did he pick this guy? God could have chosen anybody to be this thing, this go-between that actually brings people closer to God. When you look at it, why Jesus? That's all things come from God. Well, this thing that he puts here to so we can know the difference between idolatry and his gloriousness, if you will. He chose Jesus. I find that interesting, and the result of that in the modern world has shown to be it's working now. It's working like it's supposed to. I don't know. I'm agreeing with you that there's something to be said, particularly, and I'm prejudiced, with the American Christian when it comes to charity. That says everything. Everything. If we can look at Sodom as the know not what to do, the big thing was you die in the streets with gold in your pockets of hunger. That mindset, that the non-charitable. And America has proven, these Christians have proven to be the exact opposite. Go ahead. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, on one hand, that government in some
Mr. Bearden, can you speak up or get closer to the mic just a wee bit?
Is this any better?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's okay. Government, in some respects, is partly to blame for that, because once they stepped up and started doing low-income housing assistance, food stamps, food cards, whatever you want to call it, they have stepped in and used your tax money to try and offer relief to these individuals. And in a lot of respects, that has taken away from communities themselves, which for the longest time, even way back, there were soup kitchens, there were bread lines, there were communities taking care of these less fortunate individuals. Some people were actually taken in and given employment in a lot of places, but once the government started giving out unemployment and food stamps and low-income assistance housing, well, communities no longer had to be involved, so to speak, or it took away a certain level of responsibility. And a lot of folks, unfortunately, took the attitude of, well, just let the government take care of it.
You're touching on something I wanted to bring up, and we're at the perfect time. I'm going to shift a focus that I wanted to bring up. Of course, anybody can bring anything they want up. Was, okay, the holiness, if you will, okay, it's in Torah, okay, the holiness of money. The holy shekel is monetary. Am I not mistaken? This is what God deems is holy currency amongst the nation of Israel, right? And in this week's Parsha, when you take a census, it's actually the beginning of the Parsha. Where was it? When you take a census, you count the shekel, a half shekel, same price for everybody. to donate for the tabernacle, but he calls it an offering. And I can't remember, and I might be wrong, but until then, except for an exchange of silver except for general trade, we don't get any kind of holiness of money discussed that I can't remember. So I wanted to bring up, should we, and this goes along with a vote with your feet, vote with your dollar, very capitalist, and there's nothing wrong with free trade. I don't like the profit margin myself. I hate it, but should we look at, are we learning something? And I didn't look deep enough. Thought I'd ask everybody here, when it comes to money, should we look at everything we spend as an offering? Is that how we're supposed to look at this?
I'll give you part of what I understand.
All right.
The word for the half shekel was made of silver. And silver, the word that they use for silver here is kesef, which also translates to modern day. Kesef means money. But silver was also what was donated for the sockets and other parts of the temple. The half shekel that was given was referred to as an atonement. Any other silver or kesef that you chose to give was an offering. Asher, am I wrong there?
I'll take your word for it. I mean, I'm not. Nowhere in the Torah does God speak about minting coins. So, I mean, the notion of shekels and what that shekel may have been made of must have been adopted from either Egyptian society or just, But
so it's not money. What is a shekel? What is the holy shekel? It's in Leviticus, isn't it?
yeah, I don't think it calls it a holy shekel. I mean, it's a form of currency, but there's different types of currency. I mean, even used in rabbinic literature too. Tons in the Talmud. From a dinar to a zuz, but a shekel.
It more was about the weight than it was anything.
Uh-huh.
I
What was the weight of a half shekel?
I think it was the equivalent to 20 gerar, but it doesn't tell you what a gerar weighed. And then there was evidently there was the gold shekel that had a specific weight. But what does it translate to today? I don't know. I haven't worked out the math. I don't know what a gerar was, or 20 gerars, but it just specifically mentions the weight and that it was silver. As far as being minted or having any image on it, I don't think it speaks of that at all. You're correct.
Smart.
So what was the initial question? Like, if we should in some way give what as an offering?
Well, not like an offering, but we've seen money as an exchange. 30 shekels of silver for Joseph.
For Jesus.
Okay. So we've got money mentioned of exchanges and whatnot. What I'm getting at here is we're getting monetary weighted silver, as it was. I was originally under the impression it was gold. Silver. It's monetary. It's a donation for the Mishkan. It brings up spending money in a whole, if you will, a holy fashion. To atone for sins. If you're going to take a census, you don't count heads, you count the half shekel. So it seems to be giving us a clue or some hint to some greater purpose, if you will, spiritual, and I mean that in an almost Buddhist sense, spiritual.
I don't think there's anything spiritual there. It's just civil. I mean, they were building a society. Now, a half shekel couldn't have been worth that much because everyone was required to pay it, even the poorest person. yeah, I don't think there's always a spiritual meaning to everything that happens in Torah. I mean, they were trying to build a society, right? I mean, rabbinic law is civil law, right? It's not always spiritual. I mean, nowadays we translate everything. Any notion of salvation in Torah is always an earthly salvation. Like rain in its proper season, peace. And nowadays it's heavenly reward. Mansions in heaven and all this stuff. I don't think there's always. It's not spiritual. I mean, by the simple fact that the Almighty doesn't mention heaven or hell, or really an afterlife anywhere in Tanakh, should be enough for us to know that He wants us to focus on this world and how things work on this world and not on the world to come. So I don't always look for a spiritual meaning to everything. I don't really think there is one. I think they were trying to establish, a country. Yeah, but I like money a lot. It says even in the Talmud that a poor man is equivalent to a dead man. This whole notion that I think people mistranslate when it says that the love of money is the root of all evil. Well, I mean, it's the love of money, but I mean, to have money is a great thing. Taking vows of poverty, St. Francis of Assisi, all that stuff. I don't think that, I mean, even in Judaism, it prohibits you from giving too much tzedakah, right? It's like giving all your money away. Money is a good thing. We should all be rich and deal with our problems by becoming rich. I mean, we have the ethics down packed. I mean, on a Thursday night, like we could be out riding our motorcycles, right? But we're here in a Bible study. So I think ethics, we got it down. Just give us the money now. You know what I mean?
Amen. All right.
I just want to say real quick that speaking of Parnasa, I want to ask the rabbi for a blessing.
I don't do those things.
You got to give me something, bro. Look, I'm working on converting, and I'm to use a Christian term, I'm stuck in limbo. So can you get me out of limbo?
So I've always said that instead of asking for a blessing, ask for advice, because there's no such thing. I mean, I don't even think people know what a blessing actually is. I mean, I don't really know even exactly what a blessing is. But this thing that people go to rebbes for a blessing, asking for advice is worth a lot more, right? And but if anything, I mean, God should bless us to the extent that we try to make this world better, like through His instructions, right? That's a blessing for everyone, But I mean, this whole thing that a man can impart a blessing on someone sounds very, it sounds like very Catholic. Father bless me. I like virtually like all these blessings that we see in Tanakh. I mean, specifically like in Bereshis, never really amounted to much. I mean, Yitzchak's blessing on Yaakov did not make his life easier one bit. Everything he had, I mean, he had to sweat and cry over, and this whole thing of blessing Yaakov in his deathbed, his blessings really went nowhere. It says that Shimon and Levi, like pretty much wouldn't amount to anything, and we see Levi, like being the most pious tribe at the end. I don't think, I mean, God tells us that He blesses us if we keep His commandments. So someone stepping in some way, like gumming up the works with the blessing, in other words, redirecting prosperity your way, I don't see it as a Torah principle. Although there's a lot of things that happen in Torah, but I think anything between Genesis chapter 3 to Exodus chapter 20 that we should emulate, because that's the patriarchs trying to figure things out by themselves. Right? There's a lot of culture going on there, things that aren't necessarily sanctioned by the Almighty. I mean, no one walks around thinking that they could deceive their brother, right? But suddenly it's okay to bless your children because Yaakov blesses children, right? It doesn't really, these people didn't have Torah. Now, post-Torah, like the bond was remade that was lost with Adam, It was remade on Mount Sinai. So now we have something to emulate. But anything the patriarchs did, I wouldn't, I'd think twice about doing any of that stuff. Marrying a sister, or telling someone that your wife is really your sister, like all these things. Yeah, I think it's silly when people go to Hasidic rabbis for blessing. It's just so nonsensical. Honestly, there's Jews being persecuted. Well, there are hardly any Jews in these Muslim countries now, but for sure, they used to be persecuted, and some Rebbe is going to give you a blessing that you should get a raise in your job. It just sounds almost like a psychic, like not knowing the lottery numbers to, I don't know, pay her own rent. It's just sounds silly to me. But anyways, yeah, God should bless us all with the amount of mitzvot that we keep. Like if we keep mitzvot, by definition, the Torah says that we will be blessed. But anything outside of that, yeah. But yeah, if it helps, we should all be rich. Rich, and then we could actually fight evil in this world. 'Cause sometimes it takes money to. Look at TBN, man. Look at Paul Crouch. Rest in peace. Did I lose everybody?
Nope. Go ahead, Ross.
No, I'm right on. I'm 100%. I agree. That's the most logical and best way to describe a lot of what you read. To go back just a little bit briefly, as far as unethical goes, and you were talking about the children laying drunk on the curb for whatever reason. Apparently somebody felt like it was necessary to let this child drink to the point that he got drunk. And again, I think it's more like a tradition or whatever that's come along. But if you read in Esther carefully, when the king said that people should drink, he said, you will drink at your will. You're not commanded to drink or ordered to drink, or you're not specified to drink any particular amount. Just drink at your leisure.
Yeah, but that's not where they get it from.
No.
From the book of Esther. That in the Talmud, it's a completely rabbinic holiday and a rabbinic command, but it says that one should drink to the point that he doesn't know the difference between blessed is Haman and cursed is blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman.
Right.
So that's what it's built on. But then the understanding is that there's a story of Rav Zera, like getting so drunk that he slid the throat of his study partner, and then through magical powers he brought him back to life. So on this, the Meiri, a famous rabbi, said that the rabbis prohibit drinking on this. But we don't even need the rabbis to step in and tell us anything. That we know what the Torah says about the drunkenness of Noah and the drunkenness of Lot.
Yep.
Or like the rebellious child, that one of the things he does is that he's a drunkard. Clearly, now there's no law not to drink, or there's no law not to get drunk, but it's in context, it's understood that it's a negative thing.
Repeatedly.
Yeah, absolutely. But most rabbis don't have the courage to speak out against this, because they're going to be stepping on too many toes, right? And just go to your local Chabad Purim night, and you'll see people pass out on the floor. It's really ridiculous. And also, I'm against people dressing up too. With the whole dressing up is not part of Jewish law. It's not in Shulchan Aruch. It's not in the Talmud. It's not in the Mishnah Torah.
It's about God being concealed, right? And then
right. Okay. Right. Well, the statement is Hester Panim, or that God hid his face. However, the custom of dressing up was invented 400 years ago in Italy. There's a whole article written by Rabbi Mark Angel. Yeah, you guys could Google it. That dressing up was copied from the Christian carnival in Italy, because Purim always falls in around carnival time. And we see this with the carnival in Rio, Mardi Gras. It's always within 2 weeks of that, right? So the Jews copied the Christians dressing up. And nowadays people think this is a Jewish thing, and people go even as far as to break the actual halakha. Because I don't know how many times you guys have walked into a synagogue and seen your rabbi dressed like a woman on Purim, a clear Torah violation, by the way.
Oh yeah.
And no one says anything. Why?
Maybe he was dressed like a transvestite.
Well, I mean, it's the notion of a beged ish or beged isha, the clothing of a woman or a man. Like you can't. It's a strict Torah prohibition. But the reason they do it is because the Ramah, a later medieval rabbi, said it was okay. Now I believe in oral law, and I believe in the rabbis, but I believe in the Torah first. Everything has to align with the Torah, or it's to be tossed out, right? But these people don't ask these questions. Now, I'm not the only rabbi who feels like this. There's other rabbis, Rabbi David Bar Chaim. There's a few other rabbis who made videos about getting drunk and dressing up on Purim, but it's silly. Now, I like dressing up. I mean, I'm not, my wife's into cosplay and all that stuff. You got
a nerd. Yes, you picked good.
I'm cool with that, but the problem is, when you combine that with religion, I mean, I think religion should be a little serious. You know what I mean? And this is why, I don't really like women clergy. Like I have a video how women should not be rabbis. According to Jewish law, a woman could be a rabbi, right? But I think that it you're going to lose all the men. You're going to lose. It's just, it's hard enough to get men to a synagogue and to or to church, to have some woman there, trying to tell them how to be a man. It just doesn't work like that. I mean, I think a woman could be a leader, for themselves. But regardless, I think that religious life has to be masculine, and I think the Torah emphasizes on this. Most pagan gods, a lot of them were sexualized with divas, with women, deities, and it completely sexualized religion. And I think Torah was there to desexualize it, right? This is why it always spoke about God in the masculine, with the exception of when it says Shaddayim. One time it refers to him in the feminine.
Elohim feminine?
No.
Okay.
Well, it's not for sure. Yeah, but some say that Elohim in itself is not a descriptive term, but it's a title.
Oh.
Right? In other words, it doesn't mean gods, because that would be
right.
But that would be but if it was feminine in that sense, it would be Elot. Because right, but we have other words in Hebrew like that, like Ephraim. Ephraim, it sounds like it's in the plural, but it's a clear word, I mean, it's not a descriptive term, so there's some descriptive terms. I mean, there's what it's called in English. I mean, I forgot, but it's a noun. In other words, it's not an adjective. I think that Judaism has a lot of important things to do, to have, I don't know, your kid go to the synagogue and see the rabbi dressed like a clown. I mean, this is a serious religion. There's people with real problems out there. The last thing, that's one thing that I appreciated from Christianity. I mean, when I was a Christian, I was involved in street ministry, and I went places where people didn't want to go. I dealt with prostitutes, the homeless, and drug addicts, and I dealt with people with real problems, and I was trying to give them real solutions. And this is why, seeing your rabbi drunk, dressed like Batman, it's not I'm an army guy, conservative. I'm a gun owner. I'm not. Yeah, this is it's just wacky, and it's just, unfortunately. Now, mind you, the serious rabbis don't dress up. It's always typically the congregational rabbis, because the board pays their salary, so they have to seem pliable.
So it's one thing to celebrate. It's one thing to celebrate. It's another thing to the golden calf.
Well, I mean, we're all supposed to celebrate for Sukkot and Shabbat, and I mean, nobody dresses up for that. I mean, but the custom was adopted, from like non-Jews. You know, so
Right.
anytime a Jew will say, "Oh, well, you can't do that because it's, you know, whatever hukasakum or derech hamori," you know, like the ways of the Gentiles. I mean, how about Purim? I mean, honestly, how about Hanukkah?
Is it as celebratory as Purim? For instance, we did our first read through of Esther, and I just learned that we boo Haman, and that there's certain things we repeat, and it was fun. I don't think I've ever had more fun, like, you know, cotton candy roller coaster kind of fun reading Torah as I had when I read Esther. And it's, you know, it's a very celebratory thing. Was it?
There's no law to boo Haman, by the way. But that's also a custom that developed maybe like a few hundred years ago.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, we had fun doing it.
No, it's fun. It's fun. It's just, well, there still should be, you know.
Was it always a celebratory kind of, I don't want to say frivolity, but was there some frivolity always in Purim, and we just kind of took the
whole month of Adar. I mean, the whole month of Adar is supposed to be one of joy, you know, not silliness. You know, I mean, it's already gone too far. I mean, being joyful and being a clown is two different things, right? You know, but those lines are blurred nowadays. Yeah.
I grew up as a clown in the circus. You know that?
Right. Well, it's different. That's also different. I mean, these clowns in a circus is not equivalent. I mean, that's like a real profession.
Like a joker on the street. I know what you mean.
But
no kidding though. I was in the circus. I was trained by the original and the originator of Ronald McDonald, the yellow suit.
For like the rodeo part? I mean,
no, he was a ringling clown. His name was Mike Polikovs. His father was Coco of England, and his father was Coco of Russia. And he was in America, and he was traveling with Ringling, and McDonald's wanted, Ray Kroc wanted to have a mascot. And Willard Scott did his thing for his local McDonald's, and it was nothing. And they hired this Ringling clown, who was my mentor at the time, you know, when I was a kid. And he invented the yellow suit, and one pocket held the kitty cup, and the other one held the kitty fry. Another pocket held the kitty hamburger, and he invented that character, and that was the guy that trained me in my granddad's circus.
Wow.
Sidetrack.
Pretty cool. You know,
I know what you mean by clown. You know,
don't take anything seriously. You know, when a Jew tells you, "Oh, like you're copying Gentiles," there's so many things in Judaism. Even the Torah, almost every ceremonial practice you have there is an elevation of the pagan. In other words, it seems that the Almighty believes more in evolution than revolution. In other words, he believes in using what's already there and elevating it to a holy level than, you know, destroying everything and starting from scratch. And one example of this is Hanukkah. I have a video called "Is Hanukkah the Jewish Christmas?" And the conclusion of my video was that it is the Jewish Christmas. Why? Because Kislev is the December of that region. And the reason they used the 25th of December, or Kislev of that time, was because they knew that was the day all the pagans were going to be worshiping their God, and we were in some way combating that. Which is why I don't attack the Catholic Church, just because a lot of their things have a lot of pagan roots to them. They were trying to do the same thing that the Almighty did in Torah. I mean, the Rambam says that the Almighty used the whole sacrificial system to ultimately wean us away from idolatry, right? You know, anyone who's seen like a lulav and etrog knows they're really fertility symbols. If you look at them, right, harvest, crops, you know, I mean, something that looks like, you know, this and that. It's all about evolution, not revolution, you know, like using what you got. And this is what the Catholics did the same thing with trying to convert the pagans to Christianity, right? I mean, they didn't just toss out what was normal to people, right? You know, so this whole thing about purity and, you know, oh, not Jewish, right? When you see like a guy with a strymo or a black hat on it, come on, man. You know, I've heard Satmar guys tell me that they believe that Moshe Rabbeinu wore a strymo. and they actually believe this stuff. It's very
Strymel. What's Strymel?
oh, like the big furry hat. You know,
yeah, that's a Middle Eastern thing to do. Yeah, yeah. Everybody wore a big rush.
One big plus about having so many Gentiles coming into Judaism now is that they're forcing the Jew to package their religion in such a way that they could hand it over to someone else. In other words, Jews amongst Jews are never challenged, right? I mean, they never really have to speak to people who think differently. But suddenly when they have these Gentiles asking real questions, you know, I mean, giving them just a smirk, like whenever like the rabbi says something stupid, you know, so then it forces rabbis to kind of wake up and say, hey, you know what? Like these answers don't suffice for people who have actual questions, real questions. And also like outreach, for example, campus outreach, I think sharpens rabbis a lot also, because they have, you know, kids that aren't going to be pushed around, you know, on the why they should be or remain Jewish, right? You know, so this whole convert phenomenon, and we're living it, mind you. I mean, we're living at a time where more people are converting to Judaism than any time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's still small compared to other religions, but just the influx because of the information out there, right? I mean, we're living in good times, and everyone, but all this stuff about Judaism, you know, like the problems within Judaism, like should just encourage you guys to want to be Jewish even more because there's something to do. You know, there's something to fix. The battle's not over. You know, it's not like people walk around thinking that they're comfortable, or the rabbis feel like they're comfortable with the way Judaism is nowadays. You know, like we're not comfortable, right? And you know, like they don't have a monopoly on Torah. The Torah belongs to all of us.
It's going to end this system. We're leaving the age of the rabbis. We had the prophets. We had the rabbis. We're moving on. Things are changing. It's bound to happen.
Well,
the whole conversation I'm interested in with a lot of folks is, or at least in my circles here, is what is a convert? Jethro is a convert. He circumcised himself, but he was never considered fully Jewish.
How do you know?
Well, the Gutnick. Oh, I closed it.
Don't worry about what the commentators say. I mean, according to the text. I mean, he was the same, you know, Ruel, you know, who supposedly that went back to convert his relatives. Like Jewish didn't exist at that time. You know?
Right. But he also 2 years on with being with Israel said, I must go back to my people. He didn't consider himself a part of Israel 2 years on. And that's when Moses convinced him to go with. Some say he went with. There's no indication. It says, and they left. So what, you know, what does they mean? But
so I think that.
But what is conversion? I mean, when you come to it, I mean, if
well, that's not. I mean, conversion didn't exist in the Bible. Conversion, the process of conversion, is completely rabbinic. In other words, it was developed by the rabbis to legally establish who is bound by the laws of Torah and the court, and who are not. And you know, like who is not. Like we see Ruth called a Moabitess after like she was absorbed into Israel. I believe it's Isaiah chapter 55. It says, "Well, let the foreigner would not say that I should not be counted amongst those in the covenant." In other words, being Israel is not about being a people like being part of the French or the Irish, right? But it's a people unlike any other people, a nation unlike any other nation, that you could belong to any other part of the world and still keep Torah and be in the covenant. In other words, being in the covenant is what technically means being Jewish in Moses' time, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean whether you're bound to live in the land of Israel, right? It means that you're in the covenant with God. It's, you know, so like this, Jethro could be in the covenant, right? But I mean, nowadays it's translated to mean that if you're not amongst Israel, you're automatically keeping 7 laws, right? And that's really nowhere. I mean, like, why would someone who has such a now complex ethical system that actually work to make the world a better place and their family, you know, like a better, like a happier existence, why would they go back to only 7 laws? Makes no sense, right? I mean, it's so.
I kept rejecting it. It worked, and I never stopped keeping them, but it was never enough.
And, right. Well,
I'm in a position where I can't do much about that, but
I'm on the opinion.
Videos live like you want to convert, live like you're going to convert. Keep Israel. Keep that in your mind. Strive for it. Live for it. It's
You're already Jewish. You have to understand this. If being Jewish means being in the covenant, here, look, the term Jewish is hardly even used in Torah as a spiritual state. It's never used in the Talmud. Okay, you enter the covenant, right, when you decide that Torah is true and you begin to identify with Israel and Torah. That's when you enter the covenant. However, the rabbis developed a conversion program, right? Korban, Milah, and Tevilah. The rabbis developed this to make a public declaration that you are legally now part of the earthly people of Israel, but that has nothing to do with your spiritual status. In other words, you are already in the covenant because God knows the desires of your heart. It would make no sense that if you identify with the Torah, but that in some way God is still, from a spiritual perspective, going to judge you like a Gentile. If you know something is true, that's what he's going to judge you against. It's kind of, but there is no Gentile law to fight evil, right? You're telling me God's not going to adjudicate you in a spiritual realm in a negative sense if you walk by and you see someone getting beat up? Of course, I mean, you're on a higher madrega now. Like, you're on a higher level to know that this is expected of you. And that should go for every other commandments in the Torah that you know are true. This whole notion that, oh, you're a Gentile now, so go ahead and desecrate the Sabbath, it's completely idiotic. Okay? God knows you're in the covenant. No one uses that word. In the covenant means being Jewish. That's what it means. Okay? Now, you're not halachically Jewish, but in God's eyes, he knows you're living by his Torah. Here, look, every god in the old days had a method of worship attached to him, right? Baal Peor with the beats and all this stuff. The Almighty, the God of the Bible, also has a method of worship. The way you worship the God of the Torah is by keeping his instructions. That's how you worship him. In other words, if you're not keeping what he commands you to do in Torah, then you're not properly worshiping the Almighty. And no one could change that. Okay? However, the Jewish people are a physical people. They have to put physical barriers in front of you for them to be convinced that you're doing this with the right intentions. So that's, like going to the mikvah, circumcising yourself is from the Torah, but even bringing a sacrifice, all these things the rabbis instituted to prove to yourself that, yes, legally, if you break even rabbinic laws, we'll put you to death, for certain, for whatever, right? And not, then you have to keep 7 laws. The 7 laws were developed by the Sanhedrin to adjudicate Gentiles living in Jewish lands. Okay, but these are people who didn't know the Torah is true. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, doesn't God convict the heart? I mean, if you know something is true, how can you live a lie? It's so idiotic. And I think rabbis don't respond to this because they don't really care about Gentiles. Tovia Singer, Michael Skoback, I mean, they're very knowledgeable and they help a lot, but they ultimately, what they do for born Jews. They really ultimately don't care about the Gentiles. And sometimes it takes a convert to kind of shake things up and say, you know what? That we're people too, and we're not inferior, right? And I view you guys I mean, there's no distinction between you and a born Jew. There's no distinction between a Hasidic Jew and an idolater, with the exception that a Hasidic Jew has taken up the commandments and keeps Torah. That's the only distinction. In other words, if you teach the idolater how to do the same, then he's just as valuable to the Almighty as the born Jew. But no one sees this. No one knows. It's like, do you have to go to seminary to understand this? It's so clear, that it doesn't, and even nowadays, here, look, I converted. My name is George. Okay, George with a G. But for some reason, my haters call me George with a J, like Jorge. To remind everyone that not just am I a convert, but I'm a Hispanic convert. But by the way, I'm born in America, and my name's with a G. But it doesn't matter. And no one stands up for me when they do that. They're like, he's not a real rabbi because he's a convert. Everyone has lost focus
I hear women more than men complain about the way they are treated as converts, and more than men. And I hear it like recently, like people PMing me, I know, and just frustrated and saddened, and it's like, you know, a blow to the solar plexus that they're, you know, they go to daven and they can't daven because you're a convert. I mean, what was the point of you accept the conversion? You don't, or, you know, I don't understand, you know. And I hear women are going through the same thing. Hopefully, we're going to learn from this, because I don't think we've had this. I think honestly, and I say this with love, but conviction, that the Jewish people have been blindsided by the influx of love coming to them from the evangelical community, and from from people like us, and John and Rosalie, who's still with us, and Ross, who've, you know, left religion and chose Torah. There's nothing like it. I can't think of anything in history where people took Jews seriously, except for money. I can't think of any time in recent history anyway. What do we do? What all these goyim? What do we do with them? Yeah,
there are enough people challenging the rabbis on this. I mean, there's no one challenging the rabbis. I mean, I get scapegoated. You know, they're like, oh, you know, he insults the rabbis just because I challenged him. I'll be like, you know, there's three cardinal sins in the Torah.
David Katz gets the same kind of, you know that.
I mean, he's not trying to make Jews. He's trying to make like Noahites, right? I mean,
advanced Noahites anyway. At least give them something more. Give them, you know, at least show that there's a place for you, you know, and you're not just floating in the purgatory of Noahidism.
Right. Oh, I mean, everyone should just convert. I mean, someone gave me a great analogy with the other day, because I was saying that Noahidism today is a reactionary movement. In other words, it exists solely because of the insularity of the Jewish world. And so someone gave me this example that if there's a pothole in the street, you know, and people keep on breaking their ankle on that pothole, but does that mean that you build more hospitals, or you just fix the pothole? Right? You know, and that's what the rabbis are trying to do. Like, okay, yeah, no, we're supporting the Noahide movement, this and that. No, fix the pothole. The reason people are becoming Noahides is because you're making it impossible to convert. There's no law that says that you have to live in a Jewish community to convert. There's no law, right? You should be able to convert in Iowa, this and that. Okay. But you can't make it a pray in a minyan. There's no law that you have to pray with a minyan. Or you can't say Kaddish. Well, nowadays, Kaddish has been turned into ancestor worship, right? You know, in halakha, that you're not supposed to say Kaddish to bring your dead relatives out of hell. I mean, that's also something new, right? You know, there's no, you know, just keep Shabbat. Okay, like take a room in your house, make it into a little sanctuary. So if Noahidism is reactionary in general, we have to get to the root and fix the problem. Virtually every Noahide I ever spoke to ultimately just wants to be part of Israel, right? You know, but they'll take whatever they can get. And I don't blame them for that, right? But I do blame the rabbis who capitalize off this stuff.
I fought it. I wanted it, and I fought it because it didn't. I liked everything but Israel, but Jewish people. I liked everything but that. I was going to classes with rabbis. It's not like I was not familiar with anything, but when I enter into the collective world in my country, in America, with politics and opinions, I found I couldn't accept, and it wasn't until I just made it a point. It was when I started this channel that I must accept Israel for who they are. Because I can't stop thinking about this Torah. I can't stop reading it. I can't stop using it as a reference for my life. In what little meaningless way or seemingly meaningless way I had to accept Israel, warts and all, as the British would say.
Yeah,
and
Israel. I mean,
it wasn't until I did that, and a lot of them think I'm nuts. Okay, but it wasn't until I did that it was like a weight lifted off of my shoulders. And that was
one thing that converts bring in, and even Noahides bring into the Jewish world, is diversity, and they wash out the bad blood. There's no monopoly on who Israel is nowadays. I'm not happy with Jews. I mean, I'm like the opposite of, you know, I'm a biker, I'm a boxer, I'm a gun collector. Come on, man. I mean, I don't fit into your average Jewish box. Okay, like maybe in Israel a little more, but like in America, it's like I feel like a dog in a room of cats. Okay, you know, so we have to change that reality. There's no monopoly to who Jews are. I mean, you kidding me? I mean, look at Jews in the Bible, King David. You know, I mean, the manliness, right? Now you have Sheldon the accountant, right? It's a completely it's a different people. You know, in the Torah, where the Almighty punishes us for complaining, and Jews are famous for what today? Complaining. I mean, it's like a different, you know, like kvetching or whatever. It's not the same people. There's no monopoly on who Israel is. In other words, you can step in and change. One person could change all of Judaism. And it's because culture is disposable. The Torah is to make our culture. And I'm sorry, the Jews nowadays do not emulate a Torah culture. I mean, it's just, you know, it's a weak feminine culture. I mean, they don't even know how to raise children. I mean, where they make women ultra masculine and men super feminine, right? And I'm telling you, I mean, as someone
That's a trend on all boards right now.
I mean, I've seen the best of both worlds here. Okay, you know, and I've had many rabbis say, well, you know what, Judaism was, you know, fine and dandy till that you came along, you know, like trying to fix it, right? And it's not true. There's no monopoly to this. Whatever works is like should lead, right? You know, this whole thing that, okay, we've been doing this for so long, who cares? Well, you've been doing it wrong. By the simple fact that we're still in exile, right? Like, we don't have a temple, we don't have a king, we don't have, you know, means that we've been doing something wrong for 2,000 years, okay? Now, perhaps I can't pinpoint what that is, but the simple fact that we're still in exile shows that what the rabbis are doing nowadays is not working.
There's a series on Netflix, and it was not favorable, and I don't think it was fair at all. I don't think there was near as much information could be given as should have been given. But it was about, you know, up in New York, you know, they're a very closed sect of Judaism, and I'm thinking, and these people are being exiled, you know, and they go through divorce, and they don't like their marriage, and it's so, you know, these certain folks, and there's not, you know, we're not talking about a whole community, but there are certain folks who've been exiled or feel that way, and they go to support groups and all this stuff, and I'm like, what, no other community will take them in? And they're like, no. I said, well, why don't they go to Israel? For pity's sake, you got the place finally. Go home. Why don't you go? If it's that bad where you're going to be exiled from Israel and you start leaving Torah, I mean, you have no place to go. You're like a rolling stone. And it was this, and Rabbi Gav was explaining to me that it's just insular, that no one's taught that another community of Jews, even Reform, you know, would accept you into their community, would give you, there would be solace, that you would, you know, that you could have a life in Judaism, you could have a Torah-based life, even outside of your community. And that boggled my mind that it's not like that in Judaism. I mean, wow, you know, that there's so many insular. Why aren't they going back to Israel? Oh, well, there's something in the Kabbalah that says they have to wait for. I mean, what do you mean wait? Wait.
Well, I mean, Israel. So, yeah, I think I know the group you're talking about. I think it's called Lev Tahor. So, with Lev Tahor, they were chased out of Israel by like the Mossad and everything like that. You know, for different things. The Rebbe supposedly kidnapped the kid. I mean, and Israel is not such a safe place for religious Jews. Most people don't know that. I mean, Israel, it's you know, if you preach the wrong thing from the pulpit, they'll burn down your synagogue in Israel. I mean, they're more open-minded because there's more groups, but Israel is not a place that gives religious people sanctuary. But yeah, you know what? I love food. You know, my wife and I, like, we love, you know, like different types of food. And I think that by like bringing in diversity in Judaism, we could have a whole new line of kosher restaurants, you know, like I want to taste like I don't know, you know, like non-kosher grade kosher food. You know what I mean? You know, I mean,
kosher
people.
Chinese, kosher American, kosher French food.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't found kosher beef jerky yet. But
That needs to stop. We need to get some kosher jerky.
right.
Kosher jerky. That'd be the easiest thing to kosher, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, dry meat, or smoked meat.
I love jerky. All right, we're just past 10 o'clock. We're going to stop the live portion now. James the Idol Smasher at yahoo.com is my Gmail address. You can join the groups on Facebook and Google Plus, the Nilvah Nexus. We do this every Thursday night. On behalf of everyone here, Rabbi Asher Mesa, Rosalie, and myself, Shabbat Shalom, and happy Purim, happy late Purim to all you folks up there.